Yeah? You always help me. Yes, you do.
It's the same.
What? Careful then. Careful. He knows who his favorite person is. He knows his favorite person. Oh yeah. Okay, you can come give me a hug. Then you can go with your mom, okay? Oh, yeah. Okay. We'll see you later. See you later. Let's pray. Lord, you have given the Bible to be the revelation of your great love for us and of your power and will to save us. Grant that our study of it might not be made in vain by the callousness or the carelessness of our hearts, but that we might wisely hear your words, note, learn, and inwardly digest them, so that we might become mature, convinced and convincing followers of Christ Jesus. Amen. I was thinking of it. There is an Orthodox, Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox saint called Tikhon, and he was in San Francisco. He was a Russian guy, and he was the bishop in San Francisco, and he used to drive the more dignified people crazy, because he during the liturgy, the divine liturgy, if some of the children got carried away, he was known for playing football behind the altar with them. When he'd kick the ball back and forth with some of the kids, because in the Orthodox liturgy, people move around all the time. It's just this very fluid kind of thing. So the kids are all floating around, and they would get back there and they would kick a ball around, and so he was always playing, and he would get in so much trouble with the people that just thought he was just crazy. But I've always admired him. So if they come and bring football, we'll play football too. So we're looking at Acts 22:24 to 23:11. The commander directed that Paul be taken into the military headquarters. He ordered that Paul be questioned under the whip so that he could find out why they were shouting at him like this. As they were stretching him out and tying him down with straps, Paul said to the centurion standing there, "Can you legally whip a Roman citizen who hasn't been found guilty in court?" When the centurion heard this, he went to the commander and reported it. He asked, "What are you about to do? This man is a Roman citizen." The commander went to Paul and demanded, "Tell me, are you a Roman citizen?" He said, "Yes." The commander replied, "It costs me a lot of money to buy my citizenship." Paul said, "I'm a citizen by birth." At once, those who were about to examine him stepped away. The commander was alarmed when he realized that he had bound a Roman citizen. The commander still wanted to know the truth about why Paul was being accused by the Jews. Therefore, the next day, he ordered the chief priests and entire Jerusalem council to assemble. Then he took Paul out of prison and had him stand before them. Paul stared at the council and said, "Brothers, I have lived my life with an altogether clear conscience, right up to this very day." The high priest, Ananias, ordered those standing beside Paul to strike him in the mouth. Then Paul said to him, "God is about to strike you, you whitewashed wall. You sit and judge me according to the law, yet disobey the law by ordering that I be struck." Those standing near him asked, "How dare you insult God's high priest?" Paul replied, "Brothers, I wasn't aware that he was the high priest. It is written, you will not speak evil about a ruler of your people." Knowing that some of them were Sadducees and others Pharisees, Paul exclaimed in the council, "Brothers, I am a Pharisee and a descendant of Pharisees. I am on trial because of my hope in the resurrection of the dead." These words aroused a dispute between the Pharisees and Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. This is because Sadducees say that there is no resurrection, angel, or spirit, but Pharisees affirm them all. Council members were shouting loudly. Some Pharisees who were legal experts stood up and insisted forcefully, "We find nothing wrong with this man. What if a spirit or angel has spoken to him?" The dispute became so heated that the commander feared that they might tear Paul to pieces. He ordered soldiers to go down and remove him by force from their midst. And then they took him back to the military headquarters. The following night, the Lord stood near Paul and said, "Be encouraged. Just as you have testified about me in Jerusalem, so too you must testify in Rome." The English power word of the day is herring. This is a herring. It's actually an Australian herring. A herring is a type of fish that's found in the ocean. And until recently, perhaps still so, herring were the most common fish in the European diet. So before refrigeration, they were popular because they were easily dried and they were easily cured. Now what happened with them when they were easily dried and easily cured, when they went through the drying process and the curing, they became red. And so they called them red herrings after they had been dried out. And maybe you've heard of the expression red herring. In the 1800s, there were some wily British fugitives that discovered that they were being chased by the police, and they had bloodhounds hot on their trail. The dogs were sniffing for them, and they had some herring in a bag that they were carrying with them, and they discovered that they could rub the herring on the ground behind them, drag it behind them, and it would divert the bloodhounds. It confused the bloodhounds to have the red herrings drag behind them because of the change in affected the odor. So now the term is used to refer to a diversion. So if you are in debate, it's a reference to a clever device that is used to distract people from the main issue. Politicians are masters of red herrings. The most famous example of a politician who was a master of red herring was Richard Nixon and Richard Nixon's Checkers speech. When accused of receiving inappropriate campaign contributions, Nixon went on television, national television, in 1952. He was then Senator Nixon from California, and he was running to be the vice president with Dwight Eisenhower. Ike was the main candidate, and Nixon was his vice presidential candidate. And so he went on television to defend himself after being accused of having taken all of these gifts. And along about 18 minutes into the speech, the senator and vice presidential candidate admits that indeed he had received gifts. But then he goes on and says, but they were not for his personal use except for one gift that he has kept for his personal use. And so I quote here, "Another thing One other thing I should probably tell you, because if we don't, they'll probably be saying this about me too. We did get something, a gift after the election. A man down in Texas heard Pat on the radio mention the fact that our two youngsters would like to have a dog. And believe it or not, the day before we left on this campaign trail, we got a message from Union Station in Baltimore saying that they had a package for us. We went down to get it. And you know what it was? It was a little Cocker Spaniel dog in a crate that he had sent all the way back from Texas. Black and white spotted. And our little girl, Trisha, the 6-year-old, named it Checkers. And you know the kids, like all kids, love the dog, and I just want to say this right now, that regardless of what they say about it, we're going to keep it. Checkers became the red herring. It became the emotional diversion that saved Richard Nixon's political career in 1952. Until he eventually sabotaged it again in Watergate, and he couldn't find a large enough red herring at that point to fix things. But regardless of what you think of Richard Nixon, I, for one, certainly have an opinion. The Checkers red herring was an absolutely brilliant move. It was the emotional red herring that just completely threw everyone for a loop and got them off thinking about, they stopped thinking about all of these accusations. How could such a nice guy like that who loves dogs and children possibly be a crook? Likewise, some people have suggested that the Apostle Paul pulled out a masterful red herring during his hearing with the Jewish High Council. You remember how we got to this point. Paul has returned to Jerusalem from his missionary trips to the Gentile territories, out and about. And in order to make it clear that he still honors and he still respects the Jewish law, he has agreed to participate in a temple ceremony involving the vows of 4 Jewish Christians. Now, unfortunately, on the last day of the ceremony, some Jews from the Gentile territories where Paul had been and where Paul had stirred things up with his preaching, they were in the temple also visiting, and they recognized him there, and they stir up a crowd, claiming that he has brought Gentiles, non-Jewish people, into the temple, and that he is teaching people to disregard the Jewish law. Roman soldiers rush into the riotous crowd that forms, and they rescue Paul. They spare his life because they've rescued him. The Roman commander then allows Paul to give a speech from the stairs of the Roman army headquarters. And he's hoping that Paul might be able to bring some order to the mess, some clarification, because he couldn't understand what was going on. But it only makes matters worse, and the crowd goes postal. They go ballistic. And people start throwing dirt into the air. And they pull off their jackets and coats, and they're whipping them around, and they're making a big riotous noise. And especially that came about at the point where Paul told them that he had been called by God to do what?
Go to the Gentiles.
Preach to the Gentiles. Go to the Gentiles. And of course, all of this is happening in Aramaic, the Aramaic language, which the Roman commander probably does not understand. So in order to get some answers, he then orders Paul to be beaten, which was a common way that Romans would interrogate prisoners. But before the torturers can raise a hand against Paul, he reveals that he is a Roman citizen, thus exempt from being beaten like this, and he wins his reprieve. The next morning, the Roman commander called the Jewish High Council together, the Sanhedrin, and he says, look, you guys sort out this mess. This guy's a Jew. You sort out the mess. This was the highest religious court, the highest Jewish religious court in Palestine. And it included representatives from both the Pharisees and the Sadducees, with the Pharisees, the latter, being the most powerful. The Sadducees had the most power in the court. And the Sadducees were more secularized than the Pharisees, in the sense that they were willing to compromise more with the Romans in order to maintain the power that they had, the political structure and power that they had. The Sadducees were the wealthier Jews. And the Sadducees also controlled the temple and all of the comings and goings and happenings in the temple. Furthermore, you have to understand that the Sadducees did not believe in the resurrection of the dead. On the other hand, though, the Pharisees were a back-to-the-Bible populist movement which carried on the work of the prophet Ezra. Yet, in the overall scope of the political landscape, they were a minority group. They were a small number. Paul and his family were part of that movement. Look at verse 6 here in chapter 23. Brothers, Paul's giving a speech defending himself in front of the Sanhedrin. He says, brothers, I am a Pharisee and a descendant of Pharisees. Meaning I have this long lineage of Pharisaical influence. And by the way, Jesus was probably closer to the Pharisees than any of the other parties. Social parties, political parties, they all blurred together. The cultural parties. Jesus was closer to being a Pharisee than anything else. Yet Jesus was critical of the legalism of the Pharisees and at times the hypocrisy of the Pharisees. You see, the Pharisees took the Scriptures seriously, and the Pharisees attempted to live holy lives. Everybody else was just blowing it all away, saying, it's useless, we can't do it anyway. But the Pharisees, yes you can, and here's how you do it. And that's kind of where they got carried away. But the other thing about Pharisees is that they believed, based upon the Scriptures that they were very serious about, they believed in the resurrection of the dead. On a whole, they did not believe in the resurrection of Jesus from the dead, but they believed that one day all the dead people would rise again. And this belief was a major point of contention or disagreement between the Sadducees and the Pharisees. The Sadducees did not believe in resurrection. The Pharisees did believe in resurrection. The Pharisees believed in the supernatural. The Sadducees emphasized the material, the physical realm. Kind of sound familiar at all? So Paul is standing in front of the council, which consisted of this weak coalition, and he takes a poke at the character of the high priest, a Sadducee. And then, when there's a response to that, he brings out his red herring. Verse 6 again. Knowing that some of them were Sadducees and others Pharisees, Paul exclaimed in the council, brothers, I'm a Pharisee and a descendant of Pharisees. I am on trial because of my hope in the resurrection of the dead. Verse 7. These words aroused a dispute between the Pharisees and Sadducees, and the assembly was divided. This is because Sadducees say that there is no resurrection, angel, or spirit, but Pharisees affirm them all. Council members were shouting loudly. Some Pharisees who were legal experts stood up and insisted forcefully, "We find nothing wrong with this man. What if a spirit or angel has spoken to him?" And the poor Roman commander who was just trying to get answers to the problem probably did not understand a word of the proceedings or what was going on. And he's having this deja vu all over again, experience from the day before where a riot had developed. And verse 10, the dispute became so heated that the commander feared that they might tear Paul to pieces. And he ordered soldiers to go down and remove him by force from their midst. Then they took him back to the military headquarters. So Paul has been rescued from a mob for a second day in a row. It's a brilliant red herring move that saves Paul from what started out to be what the council was obviously going to do, and they were obviously hostile to him. They would have certainly called for his execution. So he says, instead of talking about the Gentile issue, he says, "I'm on trial because of my hope in the resurrection of the dead." Dazzling move. Brilliant move. But as you know, as I pondered the whole story and Paul's great line here in verse 6, I began to wonder. I wonder if perhaps this was really as much of a red herring as I had originally thought. I mean, yes, in a sense, it was a brilliant red herring because it diverted the attention of the council from his preaching to the Gentiles and the issue of whether what he taught was the Jewish law, that he taught the Jewish law was irrelevant, and it was obvious that they were not going to hear what he had to say, no matter what he said. But in another sense, at an even more profound level, wasn't he just cutting to the heart of the matter? Wasn't he really just getting to what it was that was really important? Is this not the crux of the issue, the resurrection of the dead? And in specific, one trailblazer in what would become the general resurrection of all of the dead at some point. When Paul went to take the good news of Jesus to the non-Jewish people, it was not because he particularly liked Gentiles, or that he thought that they had a better way of living, or that he was some kind of visionary trying to create a utopian, inclusive society. Paul went to the Gentiles because he was driven by the hope of the resurrection, as it had been passed on to him from Christ Jesus himself. And when you peel away everything else, the whole matter is about the resurrection of the dead. If the Son of God has come and has conquered death, that puts a whole new light on our existence and even on our purpose for existing, our purpose for living, for being. Jesus died for the sins, not just of the Jews, but for the non-Jews. And he was raised, not just for the Jews, but he was raised from the dead on behalf of the Gentiles as well. God is out to resurrect the world. Not just a small group of people, even if they are faithful people, or otherwise. He is out to resurrect the world. And that means that the good news has these worldwide implications. And it needs to be made known to the world, to outsiders as well as to the insiders. So Paul is right on, he's right on target when he says, I am on trial because my hope is in the resurrection of the dead. Yes, it was a red herring, no, it wasn't an irrelevant red herring. It was the most relevant thing he could say. And while his claim functioned as a red herring in that situation, the brilliance of it is, at the same time, it was also the point. And I really doubt that anybody who heard him say it realized it. You know, for a lot of people, to mention Jesus or church or religion or anything spiritual, for a lot of people, it's a red herring. From their perspective, it's an old fish that someone is dragging across their path to divert their attention away from what they consider to be the real issues of life. This is what Karl Marx meant when he said that religion is the opiate of the masses. Now, different people define the real issue differently. For Marx, the bottom line or the goal was having a classless society. If we can get rid of all class structure, everybody will be happy and everybody will live full and fruitful lives. For some, the bottom line goal is having a comfortable life. And the demands of the gospel, of the good news of Jesus, keep people from pursuing comfort as a major goal in life. For many people today, life is all about pursuing personal autonomy. That means being enough in control that you make all of your own choices and have no external demands, outside demands on your life beyond what you have chosen to allow. And all of this religious yada 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 is trying to get you to do what some people think is God's thing. To give God control, to give God a voice. But if the purpose of life is to do your own thing, then doing God's thing is irrelevant. It's moot. It doesn't make any difference. And worship, church, praying, etc., is all not only moot, but is a red herring in their perception. As they see it, it is a red herring to the true purpose of life. Now, in all fairness, I doubt that most people reason it out that far, and for them it's much more simple. They're more likely to be saying, I want to be out skating with my friends, but my parents drag me to church and I can't do what I want to do. This is boring. It's not very entertaining. I wish my parents wouldn't throw me off the trail by dragging this kind of thing into my life. Or the teenage boy who would really like to learn more about sex, but his girlfriend keeps dragging up this stuff about the Bible, and from his perspective, that's a red herring that keeps them from enjoying one of life's great pleasures. The man who is bushed from working hard all week, so all he wants to do is sit around on the weekends or maybe go to the mountains, and he needs relief, he wants relief, but all of the obligations that go with being a part of a church, they just get in the way in his mind. They confuse the issue, they cause stress, they cause strife, because his wife feels strongly that being a part of a church means being there for him, even though he does not dislike Jesus. He has nothing against Jesus, and he has absolutely nothing against the church per se, but these things are more like a red herring that are being tossed across the trail to slow him down, to keep him from doing the things that he really feels like he wants to do. And it all comes down to the bottom line, what are those bottom line issues in your life? What's the most important thing in life? To be entertained. Or to be free from the government, to be free from all kinds of authorities, to be free from your family influencing you and telling you what to do. Or to get away from the pressure of daily living. Or to have as much pleasure as possible in life. Or maybe it's, as you define it, to accomplish something noteworthy with your life. But if the bottom line issue is the resurrection of the dead instead, that is God's remaking of the world, recreating, giving new life to the world, starting with Jesus, who leads the way, and individuals therein that put everything, their trust in Him, that changes the whole game. It puts everything in a different light. And what was once a red herring becomes the purpose. It becomes the point of it all. So let me briefly share with you 2 reasons why the resurrection of Jesus should become the defining paradigm. It should become the purpose of your life. Number 1. If Jesus is raised, the whole nature of living is changed. If Jesus is raised, the whole nature of living is changed. A few weeks ago, on the day after Christmas, we marked the 10th anniversary of the Sumatra Andaman earthquake and the related tsunami. 10 years ago, the waves killed 230,000 people who were living in 14 Asian and Pacific Rim countries. Thailand, Sri Lanka, India, they were the 3 hardest hit countries. And the ripple from that earthquake has had more impact than the earthquake itself had. And it's still actually being felt as these countries continue to rebuild those villages that were along the coast. And in order to rebuild, they're changing all the building codes, and they're developing these tsunami alert systems. When I was on Guam last fall, I noticed that they have now posted new tsunami evacuation route signs all over the island that will lead people to higher ground. And in case you can't figure out this is high, what road to take to get from the low ground to the high ground. And it's taken them 10 years to get those signs up. Things move slowly on islands, but that is in direct response to what happened in 2004. And the point is that the ripple effect of a monumental event is incredible, even for years to come. The ripple effect of the resurrection is even more staggering. For thousands of years, it has impacted the world. It impacts the way that we do things. It affects the way that we approach life in general. The way that we approach living is different because death is no longer the final word. Life goes on beyond, and that means we are stupid if we live as though all that matters is the here and now. We will be judged, we will be accountable, we will live to enjoy the presence of God forever. Therefore, wise students, likewise, you think about it in terms of school, wise students are impacted by the fact that their grades have consequences. If it were all just a matter of pride, that would be one thing, but as you tell your children, there is life after school. And what you do now, and what you learn now, or more importantly, the patterns that you develop now, will impact your life beyond graduation. You see the correlation? What you do now affects later. Secondly, the resurrection gives us a hope that is more substantial than anything else in life. It's a hope that is more substantial than anything else in life. 1 Peter 1, 3-5 is my favorite Bible verse in the Bible. May the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ be blessed on account of His vast mercy, big, wide mercy. He has given us new birth. You have been born anew into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. You have a pure and enduring inheritance that cannot perish. An inheritance that is presently kept safe in heaven for you, in the vault. Through His faithfulness, You are guarded by God's power so that you can receive the salvation that He is ready to reveal in the last time. If you live your life to accomplish a particular goal or to set some kind of record in life, no sooner are you out of the picture than someone breaks your record or takes the organization that you've worked so hard to establish and they take it in a completely different direction. That's because records don't last, vacations don't last, relationships don't last, and house paint certainly doesn't last. It seems that the only thing that lasts is death, unless, of course, it doesn't. And the permanence of death is replaced by an equally permanent hope. Is your mind spinning yet? Am I talking too much in circles? I mean, it is kind of circular. Think of it this way. This Jesus resurrection bit is not a red herring. The real red herring is all the other fish that get tossed in front of us to sidetrack us. Who can give some examples of red herrings in life? What would be an example of a red herring that you've seen tossed out in life? Anybody?
Keeping up with the Joneses. That success makes us who we are.
The definition, the redefining of success in terms of
keeping up with everyone else.
With everybody else, okay. Yes. So it's not the keeping up with everybody else, it's the definition of success. In that way. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it distracts us.
It distracts us, yes. Yeah, if you're having to do all that stuff in order to...
You know, if you're not doing as well as your neighbor, then you're going to concentrate on doing as well as your neighbor.
That becomes the priority. And anything else that gets in the way is a red herring, a diversion, distraction. Another example. It's good. What throws us off from living out the resurrection life? I think for a lot of people, maybe it's pain or illnesses. You're experiencing pain now, so you can't imagine you can't imagine that things could ever get any better, so why would you even want to continue to live on and on? This has been so horrible now, why would we, The resurrection is what life is really all about. That's the key point this morning. The resurrection is what life is really all about. And perhaps someone has treated you poorly and you are using that as a diversion, an excuse for not really following Jesus. Or perhaps something else has been distracting you from His scent. So, some of us have been so into doing business that we don't have time for the reason that we were created. Life throws all of these red herrings at us, but you can choose whether you are going to take the bait, so to speak. I am on trial because of my hope in the resurrection of the dead, and that is the good news.